Okay, so we're going to read this opinion piece on the Wall Street Journal. And keep in mind, it's the opinion page. Doesn't reflect Wall Street Journal, even though the people who read Wall Street Journal are probably all believing this. It says here, work-life balance will keep you mediocre. Work-life balance will keep you mediocre. So I'm going to say something controversial. This guy is right for the wrong reasons. It's not work-life balance. What it boils down to is being good at something makes you extraordinary. And the only way to get good at something is to dedicate your life to it. That's really what it boils down to. If you aren't good at anything, then yeah, you're going to be pretty mediocre. That's just a fact. However, this guy is talking about doing something with his life, a business. I'm not saying that in the business sense. I'm just saying that as a statement of fact, which is, if you do something, over and over again to the point where like you're a master at it, you're going to be pretty extraordinary. Like I like martial arts and I like things like sumo, and to see those sumo guys get up there and they're larger than life and they move with such grace and elegance. You're talking about these big hulking 300-pound guys, and they move like they're weightless in a way that is extraordinary. But what you don't see is the life of the sumo from start to finish, where they're training and they got to eat a certain way, and there's a lot of tradition behind it. You can't just show up wearing the diaper and do sumo. You have to really dedicate your whole life to it. It is a way of life. What this guy did is a way of life, but a lot of people don't want what he has. And that's why I think, because I have seen people talk about this article. I think it's a little bit more overblown than people realize. I think this dude's all right. Let me take a step back. This dude's a jerk. Okay, let's just put it. He's like, I'm rich because I worked with my rear end off at 20 to build something. Not a lot of people have that opportunity. Okay, like if you're a janitor and you work your rear off at 20, you're not going to be the CEO of the company. That's just not going to happen. Okay, I don't care what Mima puts in your mind. That's not going to happen. If you build a company and it just happens to be successful, then yeah, you get to write articles like this. How many businesses are successful though? I don't like the whole concept of luck, but in a way, there is a little bit of luck there. Like, how do I want to say this? If you own the greatest restaurant in the world, but it's out in the middle of, the bayou, well, you'll still get customers, but it's not going to be like if you own the greatest restaurant in New York, where you just happen to have the luck of location, because there's always the saying, location, 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 or location's everything, or whatever saying you want to attribute to location. The whole point is there is an element of luck, but there's an element of like just savviness. You know what I mean? I've always said this, nothing exists in a vacuum. There's always some external factor. Like, you could own the greatest restaurant, but if it burns down tomorrow, are you going to be able to rebuild that? Well, maybe if you're lucky, but it's kind of like done at that point. So yeah, there is an element of luck, but there's more to it than just one element. Anyways, we're gonna read this article and hate on this guy. By the way, it's by a gentleman by the name of Emil Barr, as if it matters. So, excuse me. What if I told you that the notion of work-life balance is keeping a generation from reshaping the global economy? Okay, sure. I'm 22 and I've built two companies that together are valued at more than $20 million. That's great. I signed up my alma mater as a client, connected with billionaire mentors, and secured deferred admission to Stanford's MBA program. See, this is what I'm talking about. Is this guy is just in your face with, I'm 22 and I've done this. Okay, not every 22-year-old can do that. All right. When people ask how I did it, the answer isn't always what they expect or want to hear. I eliminated work-life balance entirely and just worked. When you front-load success early, you buy the luxury of choice for the rest of your life. So, two things immediately come to my mind. There was this TikTok that goes around, and it's funny for all the wrong reasons, but the guy in this TikTok, it's actually one TikTok, and then someone spliced it and reacted to it. That's the one that makes me smile every single time. But in the original TikTok, he says that the highest form of wealth is waking up and saying, I can do whatever I want today. And that quote sticks with me quite a bit. Being able to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want today, that is in a way the highest form of wealth. And I think it should be something that a lot of people strive for, because if you wake up and you have a job and you're obligated to do that job, like, that really is, as we like to say, a prison, wage cage, whatever you want to say it. And I know it rubs people off the wrong way, but this dude, he built these two companies, but again, he's in the same boat. He can't just wake up and say, I'm not going to work today. He has to work. The only time, the hardest you'll ever work is if you own your own business. Anyways, so it says here, in 2020, when I entered Miami University in Ohio, I calculated that I had roughly 1,460 days to build something meaningful before the real world demanded that I conform to a traditional career after graduation. Okay, that statement right there. You have to get out of the whole society demands mindset. Okay. I know that's, I even fell for it. I honestly thought that I had to have my life go in a specific way, and I worked my hardest to get my life to go that specific way, and it just, no matter what I did, it failed. Every single step of the way, it failed. Like, I went to college. Okay. The degree program that I went to, I failed at it, and I changed my major twice until I found something that I could graduate with. Romance failed. Having a job, a career. I would argue that I'm moderately successful at that, but not quite. I attempted to enlist in the military. That didn't go well either, but that was more, I was born with certain issues that I can't really escape from. I was told that I had to live a life a certain way, and roadblocks kept blocking me. And eventually I got to a point of saying, why do I have to do this? And that was kind of like my great awakening. And I remember that specifically. It was my 35th birthday, and 32nd. I had it twice, 32nd and 35. But my 32nd birthday, it was kind of like, what am I doing to myself? I'm miserable right now. And then again, at 35, I woke up one day and I was like, it was my birthday. I had to go to work. And I was like, what am I doing to myself? I'm comfortable, but I'm miserable. Here I am getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to a job I hate. To do what? If I front load all this work, I'm only met with more work. Um, I personally think that certain people, they work to live, okay, and that's fine. They have a job that they go do just so they can feed some kind of addiction or hobby, or have a standard of living that they can't get anywhere else. Like I have a friend who's an engineer, and I've talked about him before, Joe. Um, he's got two comforts in his life, right? He wants a roof over his head and he wants a jacuzzi. That's all he wants. That dude has been fired from so many jobs because he just doesn't care anymore. It's so bizarre to me, but like when I hear like people who've given up, Joe gave up, and it's sad to see. Like he once told me that his whole purpose in life, he felt, was being a dad. He explained it to me like that guy, it's Charlie Day's character in Horrible Bosses. That's his whole mission in life, is being a husband and a father. And unfortunately, it's not going to work out for him. No matter how hard he tries, it's not going to work out for him. And then he was put on this medication because he's diagnosed with explosive anger syndrome, I think is what it's called. Something like that. Explosive anger. He has a temper on him. But like the pills, in my view, have damaged him so much that his personality is like a wet paper bag now. There's just no shape to it. Like, it's, in a way, I feel bad. I feel like I failed as a friend, but like sometimes it's just hard to talk to him because he just doesn't care. And it's like, my God, what are we doing to ourselves? He says it's great, but like he just talks about how he doesn't care anymore. Like he shows up to work late all the time. He doesn't care. He doesn't have the passion that he used to have. He's just kind of aimlessly floating. And I hate to say it, but I think a lot of that medication, that's what it does, is it just makes you float through life. There's no passion. There's no drive anymore to do anything. Anyways, let's get back to this article. So he says he had roughly 1,460 days to build something before society demanded he join a traditional career after graduation. And that works out to 35,040 hours. Most students subtract sleep 8 hours a day. Okay. Show me a student that actually sleeps 8 hours a day. Classes, 6 hours. And basic necessities, 2 hours, leaving them with only 8 hours a day to spend on life. Entertainment, clubs, dating, hanging out with friends, and other activities that rarely move the needle on long-term goals. Sure. I took a different approach and spent my time building a social media company from my dorm room. That business, Step Up Social, helped companies grow on TikTok and Instagram Reels. It hit $1 million a year in revenue in less than 2 years. During my first year working on Step Up Social, I averaged 3.5 hours of sleep at night and had about 12.5 hours every day to focus on business. The physical and mental toll was brutal. I gained 80 pounds, lived on Red Bull, and struggled with anxiety. But this level of intensity was the only way to build a multi-million-dollar company. The dude's in his 20s and he gained 80 pounds, which that hurts. Gaining 80 pounds. I don't care what anybody says. That physically hurts. Like, I'm at 290 pounds right now, and it hurts. And I know that, like, my lifestyle sucks. I got to do something about it, but I just haven't had the chance because I got other pressing issues. The whole living on Red Bull, okay, whatever. And struggled with anxiety. Well, you kind of are doing it to yourself, friendo. And sleeping 3.5 hours a day is just going to screw with your mind, especially for 2 years. Or pardon me, he did it for the first year. My approach reflects a broader shift among successful young entrepreneurs. The traditional path, college, corporate career, 401k, retirement, delivers diminishing returns. I've said this for years, and actually the last video I did on retirement got bombed hard, but whatever. I guess people don't want to hear it. People barely older than we are have disrupted entire industries. We understand that the window for building something meaningful is narrow, and the tools to do it often are already in our hands. Okay, so two examples come to my mind. One is Colonel Sanders. He built a fast food empire at 60. So you're never too old to do something. That's one. And two is Dave Thompson, who also built a fast food empire. Now, granted, he worked under Colonel Sanders, and that's how he got started. But the dude was older when he started Wendy's. He already had the adopted daughter and all that stuff. So those two individuals are the proof that it doesn't matter how old you are, you have time. There's an old saying, and I like to say it quite a lot. The perfect time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. We always look back and say, what if? Well, stop doing that. Do something today. I know it's harder doing than actually saying, but there's no excuse. If you want to do something, do it. I started a YouTube channel. Is it going well? Well, it's going okay. I mean, honestly, I'm happy that I got 100 people watching. I wish that I had more, but you know what? I'm doing something. If it doesn't go well, I gave myself a whole year to get this thing going, and we're already a little over 6 months at this point. But I gave myself a whole year to get it going, and my hope is to be monetized within that year. We shall see, But I said at that year I'll reevaluate, and if I'm like so done with it by the time that year hits, I'll delete everything. If I want to continue on, which I probably will, then I'll continue on. But you know what? That was the deal. 1 year. 1 year, and then at that year, I will reevaluate and see what happens. Okay? Just what I would say is give yourself a time frame. Give yourself a time frame and plan it. But don't put yourself in planning hell. There's a point where you have to do it, Anyways, older generations call this pace unsustainable, but I call it front-loading success. Excuse me, I got the hiccups right now. My peers who have made similar choices are also taking advantage of unlimited access to information, global markets, and productivity tools with the goals of making money and, crucially, creating options for themselves. What I'm getting from this article is this guy... There's certain people out there that just are not content with how things go. I'm one of those people. I mean, if I look at it, I got a stable job, I got housing, all that stuff, but I'm just not happy with it. You know, I want to do something bigger with my life. And that's kind of, I see that frustration with this guy. You know, could I have done 3.5 hours of sleep a night? No, that would kill me. But I mean, even at that age, it would have just been too much. But you know, there's some people that like are so dedicated that they do it, and you know, you have to have that dedication. You know, a lot of people just they don't have. I mean, they have dedication, but not to something that would make money. You know. But I am very sympathetic to this guy here. So let's see here. The median salary for U.S. college graduates is $55,000, which means earning your first million takes years. But if you optimize ruthlessly during your peak physical and cognitive years, you could achieve financial freedom by 30 and buy yourself choices for the rest of your life. I mean, he's technically not wrong. Building wealth this way requires sacrifices most people aren't willing to make. This is true. You have to make sacrifices no matter what. Like, who on HGTV there was this show. It was like the Flipping Brothers or something like that. It's two brothers that worked in like a flipping business, and they talked about how like the two families, because they both had wives and kids, they lived in the same house together. And the savings that they earned from that allowed them to buy property, which they then flipped and turned it into a business. So, yes, there is sacrifices that you must be willing to make. And I noticed that a lot of people aren't willing to make sacrifices. But you have to be realistic with yourself, too. Like, if you're going to gain 80 pounds and live off of ramen, then you know, I mean, if that's what you want to do, great. But, you know, it's going to be hard to dump that weight later, too. Anyways, let's go over. He's got some tips here. Outsource everything non-essential. I hired a cleaning lady, subscribed to meal delivery services, and cut out every task that could have been done by someone else for less than what my time was worth according to our business's hourly rates. Which, again, this is true. You got to figure out what you're worth and then make that sacrifice. Like, you know, I'm not going to tell you what I make, but I make enough to where hiring a cleaning lady would probably be my worth. But again, you have to be, that time that you earn from that cleaning lady would have to be applied to whatever it is that you're doing. Otherwise, what's the point? And it says here, when your company is generating thousands of dollars a day, spending $100 to skip grocery shopping is a no-brainer. Again, he makes a good point there. Prune social networks. I filtered every social commitment through 3 questions. Would I rather be building my company or spending time on this? Will this relationship survive if I skip this event? And if not, is this something I really need in my life? The isolation was painful and some friendships didn't survive. This approach might sound harsh. Again, priorities. There's only 24 hours in a day. You got to make it worth your while. Optimize academic life from the start. I treat college like a business decision. I give, okay. Adopt a zero-based calendar, which every commitment has to justify its place on my calendar, with social events and all that stuff. And then optimize transportation. Wait a second. I've used helicopters to cut travel time between meetings. A 3-hour drive versus 20-minute flight frees up extra hours for closing deals, reviewing strategies, and working with and mentoring my team. Sure. He plans on being a billionaire at 30. Okay, fine, guy. So, like, he makes good points. Like, if you feel that your time is worth, several $1,000s, fine, whatever. Okay, cut out the noise from your life. And in a way, it's kind of his life is like trying to minimize to focus on one end. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just this dude kind of comes off as a jerk, you know? But I guess that's kind of what this article is about, is he comes off as like a finance bro. That's really what it boils down to. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to build your brand and all that stuff, great. You know, more power to you. Just don't think that you're better than me because of that. You know? And this guy's going to be one of those guys that thinks he's better than everybody because of that stuff. So, anyways, I didn't really have much I want to talk about on this, simply because, like, let me articulate my thought here real fast. If this is what you want to do, fine. No one's stopping you. I'm not going to stop you. Nobody else is going to stop you. But my whole argument is, don't blame anybody else for your decisions down the road. You know, if you want to be a billionaire, fine, great, go nuts. If you want to just be a guy that lives out in the woods, fine, great, go nuts. You know, but don't criticize other people for your problems. You know, and like, again, this is Wall Street Journal, so it's really meant for their specific audience. But like, this dude, yeah, he's building a life for himself, but he seems like the kind of guy that's just kind of, he's got the personality of an ocean, width but deep as a puddle. You know, like, there's nothing to him but this business. You know, and again, if that's what he wants to do, by all means, go nuts. But he just has no personality, it seems like. I don't know. You know, I hope he has a great life. I would be interested to see another article from him in 20 years about how he crashed and burned. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video about work-life balance will keep you mediocre, you know, you know, there's one more parting idea that I have. Work-life balance really just depends on your situation. If you're working hourly or salary at some business, then yeah, you're going to want work-life balance, okay? You know, focus on kids, wife, all that stuff. But if you're a guy like this, where you're building your own thing, then yeah, I can understand why work-life balance doesn't really help in that situation. But again, I don't know. I'm just some guy on the internet. So anyways, if you like this content, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.